speak after you have had pancakes and relatively soft music. But I will try. Seems to be no light here for my paper, but I would like to begin with thanking the organizers of this conference for inviting me to talk about a subject which has been sporadically on my mind for a very long time, but something I've had to deal with in the last 18 months. And to tell you a little bit about myself and my background, why I came in the position of dealing with ethical questions in connection with higher education behind bars, I should tell you that when I came to work at the University of Akureyri in 2002, preparing a BA and master's program in law, I had been advocating for a long time for a different approach in legal education in Iceland. And just to tell you, because maybe you have heard that we are a strange nation of 319,000 people with 7 universities. We had for almost 80 years only one university. And after the crisis, it has been difficult to tell people that competition is a positive thing, but the opposite is definitely a negative thing. So we had in many ways a difficult times with having only one university, and especially I would say with having only one law faculty, and a very strong connection between the law faculty and the politicians, and I think all of you can just imagine what develops out of this over decades. But those who were working with me were of the opinion that the BA studies in law should be a broad education in the basics of modern legal thinking and ideas, and then we would fit the traditional black letter domestic law into the framework of the master's studies. And you all know that this is according to the Bologna process, and rather some say we are Americanizing our higher education, but all the same we had the possibilities in Akureyri, because we started law teaching from scratch, that we could organize our BA studies independently from the master studies. Traditional universities and law faculties in Europe, they have built their legal education up over the last 300-400 years. So you are studying or were studying for 4, 5 or 6 years with no differentiation between the higher and lower parts, what if you call it BA or masters or whatever. It was called mainly Cand. Jur. And for the older universities, it has been very difficult to draw this line and say the first 3 years are BA studies. Experience shows that when you have finished the first 3 years, it is no possibility for you to do anything else if you are going to carry on than to take the last 2 years in law. You don't change to another subject. Our goal and aim was that those studying at our program or in our program, that they could, when they finished the BA degree, they could start studying political science, international relationship, and even philosophy or anthropology. So we have from the beginning taught subjects on BA level like rights theory, constitutional theory, international law and human rights, European law, Roman law, philosophy of law, history of law, and sociology of law, to mention a few. And this is totally different from the other universities, and in the beginning, or at the beginning, we were criticized for not being serious. So I'm just telling you that those are new views in Iceland, and if you think about that, no one really knew that there was something like sociology of law until we started teaching it. It means that we were never looking at the effects of the legal system to the greater society. So prisoners for us were either, like when I was a kid, just some guys living out in the countryside in a jail which you visited, most of you, in Litla-Hraun, which was so open that if you wanted to escape, you escaped. Or it was not even defined as escaping, you just left. And we have had problems with taking the next step and taking not crime seriously, but deciding how much effort are we putting into keeping people close behind bars, or locked behind bars. So this is just a situation of a very small society which hasn't too much money to specialize things or to build up systems which even bigger countries have difficulties with developing. But being the one who had been teaching sociology of law, when confronted with a question if the Faculty of Law would accept students who were sitting for years behind bars for serious crimes and allow them to study law with the purpose to become active lawyers, barristers, or advocates, it was kind of obvious that I would be going against the tide of the times, both in theory and practice, if I would refuse to consider such wish with open mind, and I would have to come up with some pretty strong arguments to convince both myself and others that this was something unthinkable. What happened then was that almost 3 years ago, and that was after the so-called crisis, I got a phone call from a young man who told me that he and his friend at Litla-Hraun had already been signed up for studies in business and economy at the University of Akureyri. But what they really wanted was to study law. And just to tell you, I don't know if you have been in the Faroe Islands, but in Iceland, and I think it's natural, we are living in a country of 100,000 square kilometers, double the size of Denmark and more than that, with now a little bit more than 300,000 people. Formality is not our strongest side. So usually if you are asked if you can do something, you say yes, even though you just answer yes. Even though you are not thinking about doing it, but yes, of course. And we used to be good Christians, generally good, and if you read our literature, I think we look at ourselves as good guys. And we were quite surprised in how the world reacted when we lost their money in the crisis, I must say. But I just said, yes, of course. So he was asking, this nice guy, if the faculty would consider their application positively. And I cannot sincerely recall how quickly or slowly I replied. But the conclusion of our conversation was that I, as the head of faculty, would give a green light so those two inmates could contact the teachers in charge for the courses of the autumn semester. And to explain a little bit, we are teaching a little bit, I think, like the American system in 3 weeks blocks. So at BA level, we are only teaching one subject at a time. Those two prisoners were then supposed to write timely an email to each teacher, asking for allowance to join the course, telling the teacher that the faculty approved this practice, given that the teacher would respond positively. A CC of the email was supposed to come to me to keep the necessary distance and transparency in the student-teacher relationship. And I must say, I am glad to say that the cooperation with those two prisoners, or correctly, I have to correct myself, not those two prisoners, but those two pioneers behind bars, has until now worked out almost perfectly. They have followed and behaved according to the few rules given at the beginning of their studies. But to be totally honest, I have to admit that my correspondence has been almost entirely with the one who called me at the beginning, so it limits the value of statistical information coming out of this experiment. I shouldn't forget that I have visited Litla-Hraun 2 or 3 times, and one of the prisoners has been in Akureyri, so I've had more contact than just on the telephone with this one guy. And in general, that has been a quite pleasant enterprise, so no problem with that. But if I carry on describing this contact, this guy, he has been polite, humble, and friendly without being too friendly, and he has never tried to become a buddy with me. And he has been thankful, interested, and has shown a balanced academic curiosity and respect that every teacher wishes from his students. If my story would have ended with the graduation of those two students, I would most likely never have raised the question in public, which are the ethical limits of higher education behind the bars. But of course, this adventure was too good to be a general experience. A year later, I got a phone call from Anna Fríða, all of you know, and she is the study counselor at the Litla-Hraun and other prisons in Iceland, telling me that the achievements of those two had inspired their fellow inmates. So now there were 5 more who wanted to study at our university, and 2 of them wanted to study law. And of course, I agreed to allow them to begin their studies under the same conditions as the first 2 had to accept. And to make a long story short, we were confronted with problem of improper behavior and something that our female teachers experienced as harassment. After this had happened once, I did order the student to contact teachers through me and to drop all personal lingua in his correspondence. When this happened again, I told Anna Frida that we could not carry on with this prisoner as our student and that he would be suspended from our law program as long as he would be sitting in jail. This may sound harsh, but considering how little we have studied this, how unclear the laws are and the regulations and the policy of the Icelandic authorities, we have to be careful. And I must admit, if I had just come to the idea that something like this could happen, most likely I would have hesitated in the beginning, and I wouldn't have said yes after 1 minute and 30 seconds or something. So one learns as long as one lives. But at this time it was clear to me that I had to think this whole procedure and the cooperation through again. There had been a meeting between my rector and the people in charge of Litla-Hraun and some of the other prisons in Iceland discussing a formal declaration and agreement on cooperation. And that was, I think, a year ago. The plan was then automatically put on ice for a time being, and I know it's a little bit, I think that the rector is waiting for me to draft something which he is then going to send to Margrét Frímannsdóttir, but I seriously, I don't feel that I can do it when I don't know what the legal basis or the legal framework is which is around our undertaking. So now, after having reflected upon our short but intense experience, I have come to some conclusions about which questions we have to answer before we make any further steps in the direction of the formalizing an agreement on higher education in prison between our university and the prison authorities in Iceland. And I have here, I'm going to go quickly through some questions, but before I do that, I want to mention something which I think is even, or not less important. And by being here with you, listening to other scholars talking about different sides of education in prison, and listening to you in groups, I started thinking, how is it? Do we look at prisoners as some kind of products, or do we look at them as human beings who develop and make mistakes and maybe end up in one way or another, which is difficult to say if our education or whatever is going to influence that. Is it like the legal system says, that when you walk out after you have finished your time in jail, that you have done your part of the deal? Do you start from zero? Why do we put people behind bars? Well, the easy answer is, of course, they broke the law. But what are the law? And we can come up with some practical answer and say, well, if we don't have laws, we have a situation of anarchy. But if we go through our laws, and I think all of us wouldn't compare Western societies to Muslim societies, but all the same, our legal and heritage is based on religious and ethical ideas. And this we can easily find out when we read through the laws. So we have professions which declare themselves committed to ethical basis. And I would say first and foremost we have doctors and lawyers. I'm not going to mention priests because they have a special situation in the Nordic countries which is not a very common thing, and that they have stayed higher. But doctors and lawyers, they have ethical codes which they have to sign, and if they don't work according to those codes, they can be penalized. They can be sentenced even to jail. They lose their licenses, and so this costs something. So before I start with the questions I have written down, I want you to think about it. If we are educating, it's difficult to educate a doctor behind the bars. But we all know that there in the States and elsewhere, we have examples of people studying law and becoming lawyers the day when they step out of jail. So I had gone through this with myself in the time when we were starting this, and I told those two guys, or the one I was in contact with, well, I must admit, I think it was after this happened with the third guy. If you want to get your grade, you have to come to our university and be here for half a year, so we can really go through those ethical parts with you. The ethics of your profession has to be so clear to you that we can, as a university, say, well, this is a former student of ours, and we believe that he can do well and work as a sincere person in the society. So we are there now, and I don't know really what I'm going to do this part of the year when they come. I mean, I'm definitely not going to change this, but it means that I have to work something out. I have to try to figure out if our education is just something we can send by email or test, like a test with multiple choices or something like that, or if they have really not only learned something, but that the ethics and the ideas of rule of law, of human rights, if they have them in their fingers and in their hearts. Because that is what lawyers should. But there are more practical questions, or a little bit, because I'm not going to start a discussion about this one. I just know I have to come back to this, and I hope I will be able to share some of those thoughts and some of my work in the future with some or all of you. But I wanted to go through what is the purpose of putting people in prison? And I put it, in Iceland embraces because I'm trying to figure this out for myself, for my university. And when I came back home to Iceland in 1991 from Berlin, I was studying in Berlin. I was working and talking to lawyers and judges, and I was asking them, where do I find something about the idea of putting people in prison? Are we putting them there to keep them there so the rest of the society feels secure? Or are we punishing them, letting them feel that they have done something wrong? Or are we doing like the word Betrunarhús, which is an Icelandic word for prison and means to make someone better? So we have three possibilities, and our authorities, our parliament, haven't given any answer, so we don't really know. So this is something I think we have to figure out before we go further with our educational program. And then we have, do prisoners have a right to university education while serving their time? I was in a group this morning, I think, where we were discussing the right to education behind bars, and it's clear to me, at least, because I have been working a lot with human rights, that you have the right to the education which every student should have when he is 18. So if you miss that, it's the responsibility of the state and society that you get that when you are in jail. But a right to higher education behind bars is not only questionable, I think no one really seriously have tried to answer this. And if we try to answer it, it will be based on the idea of human dignity. And I didn't find any literature on exactly that, but I've heard that a report which was referred to, Kevin did, I think on the first day, the UN report mentioned this, but I think this is very important. And then we have, do all prisoners have the same right to education in prison? This is very complicated, because like if we have someone who is sentenced for heavy violence, and the one is, we might think, why isn't this person in a madhouse? He's crazy. And people are afraid of being too close to this person. We have all kinds of difficulties. At least we cannot ask or we cannot demand that teachers take on that task or take that task to teach a person they know that the one has been killing people or whatever. So we have to have a clear criteria of what stops a prisoner in being allowed to study. So all those things have to be clear, because if they are not, we will start developing a system where in the end prisoners can take the prison authorities to court if they mean that they are not treated equally to other prisoners. And if you don't believe me, just look at the judgment practice of the Human Rights Court in Strasbourg. So they are clear on that you are not, if you don't have clear criteria before you start something, you shouldn't treat people differently. So this is something we have to take care of. And which are the general human rights of prisoners? This is also something we should start looking at, because like in Iceland, we have interest groups of prisoners talking about the violations of their human rights. Sometimes this is definitely right, sometimes not. But how should they know? Who is helping them to figure out? So this is something I think that the authorities, both the prison authorities as such, but I think that the government and the parliament are obliged to define the rights based on our international commitments. And then we have the question of how much contact should there be between student and teacher. And by listening, I think, to the guy yesterday talking about the apps and the internet thing, that we can teach everyone everywhere, and they can learn everything. Do we need any contact between teacher and student? And we know, because the university in Akureyri is the #1 university in Iceland in distance learning. And I have been demanding that we take a discussion on, is there a difference in distance learning and traditional one? I'm not sure. But I find it hard to believe that we don't need to take that discussion after hundreds of years of traditional teaching. And we all know that the academic teaching was a group discussion in former times. And I believe, and I think quite many, at least of people at my age, believe that something happens in a group when you are with people. Maybe we are wrong and this can happen on Skype. I have taught on Skype. I have been teaching a class in Alaska from Akureyri. I was surprised that something happened, but definitely it wasn't the same. So I think this is something we have to discuss. And then we have to think about it. How is the situation of the teacher if he is in close contact? And something like I told you can happen, that women who know that the prisoner they are teaching is sitting because of sexual violence or something like that. So you don't need very much to start worrying, I can tell you that. And just when you start thinking about it yourself, you feel it quite quickly, how unpleasant it can be. And I just tell you, just to visualize this, that this was in Arctic studies. And the student wrote to the teacher, who is a famous specialist in Arctic studies, that he wanted to write his thesis under her supervision, and that he would like to travel with her in those places of concern when he had finished. And what do you say? Yeah, well, we'll look at that when we're out. Yeah. And he will come straight to you and say, well, So this can be, even though nothing happens, this can be so unpleasant that you can't really ask people to do this if they are not totally willing and know what how the situation is. And then a little bit, just a slight change in the question. How much contact can there be? And this is also a question because it's not the same should or can. And I'm just mentioning this, that this is something we have to think about. And here is the question which fits to what I was saying about professions. Are universities ready to graduate prisoners who have committed serious crimes in sensitive fields of occupation? This is something we have to talk about. Because even though we hesitate to make it possible for prisoners to finish their legal studies in prison, they can, of course, when they come out, even though we don't accept them as students, the day after they are free, they can show up at our university and sign in, and we have no possibility of saying whatever. We just have to accept them. If they have qualifications, we have to say yes. We are a public university, and we have no means in refusing people because they were behind bars. They have finished their sentence. So we have to go through this and decide what we mean by professional ethics. And do the universities have a stronger obligation to take the mental situation of the prison students into consideration than judges have when they sentence people to jail? This goes in the same line. It is clear that if we have an ethical code connected to some professions, it means that we make ethical requirements to people who are going to practice those jobs. So we can't really deny ethics as a part of education. We are not teaching religion anymore. And it is very difficult and very sensitive to teach neutral ethics. But this we have to go through also. We have to look for the answers, and I know they are not lying there, but we have to look for them. And is it possible that a university which provides teaching to inmates can be charged for not allowing some of the prisoners to study a given study line, without a clear violation of behavioral rules? And this is also in the line about not making any now I don't remember what they call discrimination, but all discrimination is forbidden according to the Declaration of Human Rights. So we have to look at this, and this will be the end of the list. It could have become much longer if we give ourselves time to visualize different situations which can come up when running programs of higher education in prison. I would be glad if you could help me, and not now because time is running out, but in the future, with answering but a few of those questions. It would help me even more if you could provide me with further ethical questions and dilemmas in this context. And now I think I put it also on. I thank you for your time and patience, and sincerely hope that you've gotten something out of this story and exciting for many more. Thank you.